It started like any ordinary night. People were going about their lives, some watching TV, some finishing work, others chatting with family over dinner. Children were playing in their rooms, and millions of adults were scrolling through their devices, completely unaware that history, or rather catastrophe, was about to strike. Across the world, screens flickered, and then suddenly, every device connected to the global network stopped its normal programming. News channels froze. Social media feeds blinked into black, and then slowly, an unfamiliar broadcast filled every screen. It was not human. The shapes on the screen were metallic, sleek, alien ships that glimmered in the darkness of space. Their movements were precise, calculated, and terrifyingly fast. At first, no one understood what was happening. Governments scrambled to respond, but nothing worked. Every attempt to shut the transmission down failed. Then the voice came, and it was cold, mechanical, and final. It spoke in a language humans could somehow understand, a language translated perfectly by some unknown technology. The message was simple, horrifying, and impossible to ignore. Humanity was about to be judged and exterminated. Across the globe, people stopped in their tracks. There were screams, cries, and prayers, but no one could turn away. The broadcast shifted to live feeds of distant human colonies. Entire cities, buzzing with life just moments ago, were reduced to chaos. Buildings were engulfed in fire, streets cracked under unimaginable pressure, and the sky was filled with strange shimmering explosions. It was instantaneous, yet somehow deliberate. Those watching could see families fleeing, soldiers trying to fight back, and yet nothing could stop it. 10 billion people. The magnitude of the loss was impossible to comprehend. And yet there it was, shown to the entire world in real time. People on Earth were paralyzed. Parents clutched their children, neighbors held each other, and for a moment, the world was silent. The only sounds came from the screens on the broadcast and the trembling of those who watched. Scientists and engineers stared at the screen in disbelief. Pilots and soldiers gripped their chairs, hearts pounding. The scale of the attack was beyond imagination. It wasn't just a strike against a few colonies. It was a methodical extermination of life on a scale that humans had never faced before. In living rooms and offices, people wept. Some turned away, unable to watch the horror unfold, but many couldn't. Their eyes remained fixed on the screens, wanting to understand, to somehow process what had just happened. There was anger, too. Anger mixed with fear. How could this happen? They whispered. Why would they do this? News reports tried to explain, but there were no answers. The Galactic Empire, as the broadcast called itself, had declared humans a threat, and their definition of justice was total annihilation. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military leaders and world officials huddled in bunkers, trying to formulate a response. But the truth was clear. Humanity had been unprepared. The fleets, the weapons, the technology, the Empire's power was overwhelming. Every effort to contact the attackers was met with silence. Every attempt to strike back failed before it even began. On the screens, entire armies vanished, and cities crumbled like sandcastles under a tide of unrelenting fire. Despite the chaos, stories began to emerge. Survivors from outer colonies managed to send fragments of messages, short bursts of data describing their experiences. They spoke of ships larger than entire continents, of weapons that seemed to bend reality, and of soldiers whose bodies were, both machine and organism, terrifying in every sense. Even as Earth processed its grief, these messages added layers of fear and determination. Humans had never imagined that such a thing could exist, and now they had seen it with their own eyes. Families who had lost loved ones in distant colonies mourned, but their grief was soon replaced by something more dangerous, a desire for revenge. It wasn't just anger, it was determination, a realization that if humanity wanted to survive, it could not remain passive. Across the planet, underground networks of scientists, engineers, and military strategists began to form. These were not ordinary plans for defense. These were blueprints for retaliation, for survival, for reclaiming the honor of a species nearly wiped from existence. Among the chaos, stories of human courage began to surface. Pilots who had escaped the first strikes risked everything to rescue civilians. Engineers hijacked alien technology, trying to learn how it worked, hoping to use it against their attackers. People who had once been ordinary workers or students became part of a global effort to understand, to fight back, to plan for a future that seemed impossible just hours before. Humanity was grieving, yes, but it was also waking up to its own potential. One of the most chilling aspects of the broadcast was the scale. Earth had never seen anything like it. 10 billion lives gone in moments. Cities reduced to ash. Entire civilizations erased. And yet, it wasn't just destruction. It was a message, a demonstration of what power could do. The Empire wanted humans to know their place in the galaxy, to understand that any resistance was futile. But in showing their power, they had unknowingly awakened something deeper in human hearts. Everywhere, people began to prepare in ways they never had before. Schools and offices turned into makeshift bunkers. Scientists pored over alien signals, decoding patterns in the destruction that might reveal weaknesses. Soldiers trained tirelessly, not for conventional battles, but for the unimaginable challenges of space warfare. Ordinary citizens contributed by organizing supplies, securing communication lines, and supporting their communities. Humanity was becoming something new, not because it had to, but because survival demanded it. The days that followed were a mixture of mourning and quiet action. Streets were eerily empty as people grappled with the scale of the tragedy. Yet, beneath that quiet, something else grew, a determination that no one could ignore. The broadcast that had begun as a signal of hopelessness had, ironically, united Earth like never before. Borders, politics, and old rivalries faded in the face of a common threat. Humanity realized that it was now a single species with a single goal: survival, and one day, retaliation dotted homes across the planet. People shared stories of their losses. They spoke of loved ones who had vanished on distant colonies. They described the fear that had gripped them as they watched cities burn on their screens. And yet, they also spoke of hope, hope that humanity could rise from the ashes, that no matter the odds, no matter the power of the Empire, humans would find a way to fight back. That hope became the quiet heartbeat of the world, a rhythm that pulsed under the grief, under the horror, under the uncertainty. By the end of that first week, Earth was no longer the same. The planet had witnessed the worst atrocity imaginable. And yet, it had also seen the birth of a global determination. Humanity had looked into the face of annihilation and survived not just physically, but in spirit. And somewhere deep in the minds of world leaders, scientists, and ordinary citizens, the first seeds of a plan began to form, a plan that would not only avenge the fallen, but ensure that no species could ever threaten humans again. For the first time, humanity understood the cost of being powerless, and they vowed, silently and collectively, that power would be theirs. The broadcast that had started as a message of death and despair had, inadvertently, lit a fire that no alien force could extinguish. From grief came unity. From despair came determination. And from the ashes of 10 billion lives, a new resolve emerged, a resolve that would shape the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. That night, as the world fell asleep under a quiet sky, millions stared at the stars and wondered, if such destruction could come from the heavens, what could humanity do if it decided to fight back? That question, terrifying yet thrilling, would haunt and motivate every human being who had survived. For the first time, Earth was ready to write its own chapter in the galaxy's history, and that chapter would begin with revenge, resilience, and a promise that the name of humanity would never be forgotten. The days after the broadcast were quiet, but the quiet was heavier than any noise humans had ever heard. The world had been shaken to its core. Cities continued their routines, but nothing was the same. Schools were open, stores functioned, people moved through streets, but inside, hearts were broken. Every family, every neighborhood, every city carried the memory of the 10 billion lives that had vanished in an instant. The scale of the tragedy made it almost impossible to comprehend. People tried to talk about it, tried to explain it to each other, but words failed. How do you describe something so vast, so horrifying, and yet so real? In the first few days, grief dominated the world. Humans could not escape it. Adults cried in offices, children clung to parents, and friends found comfort only in shared silence. On every street, memorials appeared spontaneously. Candles, flowers, small handwritten notes, they were everywhere. People wanted to honor those who were lost, even though most were beyond recognition. Images from the broadcast replayed endlessly in people's minds. Cities in flames, families fleeing, and the merciless alien ships above. That image, the cold, silent fleet of the Galactic Empire, was burned into the collective memory of the planet. Governments called emergency meetings, but even the most experienced leaders were at a loss. The broadcast had shown humanity the power of the Empire, a force unlike anything seen before. It was not just a military power. It was a force that could erase billions of lives without hesitation. Leaders realized that conventional warfare, even with the most advanced human technology, would not be enough. The usual strategies, the usual armies, would fail. Humanity had been forced to confront a terrifying truth. For the first time, survival depended on ingenuity, cooperation, and speed unlike anything in history. At the same time, quiet resistance began to form. In hidden rooms, underground bunkers, and abandoned research stations, scientists, engineers, and military officers met. They spoke in low voices, aware that the world outside could not yet understand their work. Their discussions were not about revenge, they were about survival. If humanity could not find a way to fight back, if it could not learn from what had happened, then the extermination would continue. The survivors from outer colonies had sent fragments of messages, detailing the alien technology, their strategies, and the sheer scale of the fleet that had destroyed 10 billion lives. Those fragments became the foundation of new plans. For weeks, these hidden teams worked around the clock. They built models, simulated battles, and attempted to reverse engineer alien technology from fragments that had reached Earth. Engineers dissected alien signals to understand propulsion, energy output, and weapon systems. Scientists studied patterns in the destruction, the speed of the attacks, the targeting methods, and the precision with which entire colonies were wiped out. Every small detail mattered. Humans were learning, and for the first time, they began to see a path, faint as it was, toward defending themselves. Meanwhile, ordinary people carried on, but they too were preparing. Communities organized. Neighborhoods learned to support each other. Food, water, and medical supplies were stockpiled. Children were taught emergency procedures, not as drills, but as preparation for a possible future. People spoke to one another, sharing stories of survival and loss, but also sharing hope. A sense of purpose began to grow quietly under the weight of grief. Humans were realizing that surviving the first attack was not enough. To prevent future massacres, something greater needed to be done. The survivors from distant colonies became heroes and teachers. Those who had escaped the initial attacks shared what they saw. They spoke of alien ships bigger than mountains, energy weapons that could level cities, and soldiers that seemed both alive and mechanical. People listened closely. Their accounts were terrifying, but they were also instructive. Humanity had learned how vulnerable they were, and knowing vulnerability is the first step towards strength. In this new world, communication became critical. Humanity realized that old systems, emails, satellites, even radio might not be enough. They began building secure networks capable of resisting interference and interception. The same networks that once carried casual conversations and entertainment now became lifelines for planning, learning, and organizing. It was a strange transformation. Tools that had once been ordinary became instruments of survival. But survival alone was not enough. The survivors felt anger simmering beneath the surface. Anger that was quiet but unstoppable. Humanity had been humiliated, exposed, and almost destroyed in front of the entire galaxy. That anger became fuel. It was not blind rage. It was determination, focused on learning, on preparing, and on eventually turning the tables. Across this planet, people whispered of a possibility that had once seemed impossible: retaliation. But it was not just revenge. They wanted to ensure that nothing like this could ever happen again. World leaders, realizing the scale of the threat, began coordinating in ways that had been unimaginable before. Rival nations set aside old conflicts to form a global strategy. Military commanders shared intelligence. Scientists shared research. For the first time in history, Earth's inhabitants were united not by treaties, politics, or fear, but by the shared goal of survival. Secret bases were established in remote regions, deserts, deep oceans, and isolated islands. Each base served as a hub for planning, training, and experimentation. No detail was too small. No idea was dismissed. Every human being had a role to play, from analyzing alien signals to organizing supplies, from training for combat to teaching others how to survive in space. In the midst of all this planning, the world continued to grieve. People remembered the lives that were lost. Parents held on to photographs of children who would never return. Friends mourned friends they had laughed with only days before. Teachers grieved for students who would never sit in their classrooms again. And yet, through the grief, there was a quiet but undeniable sense of resilience. Humans understood that grief alone could not protect them. Action was required, and that action had to be precise, intelligent, and unstoppable. Technology became humanity's greatest ally. Engineers and scientists, many of whom had worked quietly for decades, began pushing boundaries. They experimented with propulsion systems, energy weapons, and defense technologies. It was a race against time, a race against an enemy whose power was unmatched. Every discovery, every innovation became a step closer to survival. And with each success, humans grew more confident. They were no longer entirely powerless. The Empire had underestimated the resilience of the species it had tried to destroy. Training became rigorous. Soldiers learned not only conventional combat, but also strategies for space warfare, evasive maneuvers, and survival in environments that humans had never encountered before. Pilots trained in simulators designed to replicate alien ships and weapons. Engineers studied alien technology to discover weaknesses, while scientists focused on energy and propulsion methods that could give humanity an edge. It was a world transformed, where every human effort, no matter how small, contributed to the larger plan. Even the youngest humans played a part. Children, teenagers, and students were educated in ways that prepared them for the new reality. Schools taught survival skills, basic engineering, and problem-solving. Sports and games became training for endurance, coordination, and teamwork. Humanity was being reshaped, not just physically or technically, but mentally and emotionally. The broadcast had destroyed much, But it had also ignited a fire that no alien fleet could extinguish. As the weeks turned into months, the first outlines of a global strategy emerged. It was called Project Extinct, a name whispered quietly in the underground halls and secret bases. The plan was bold, to ensure that no species would ever have the power to threaten humanity in such a way again. It was not about impulsive revenge. It was about careful, calculated action. Humanity would rebuild, retrain, and then, when the time was right, confront the Empire with the power and precision it had never anticipated. And yet, through all this preparation, humans never forgot the broadcast. Every life lost, every city destroyed, every screen captured on the screens fueled their determination. The memory of 10 billion deaths became a symbol, a warning, and a motivation. Humanity promised itself that no one would ever be subjected to such horror again. The world may have been broken, but it was also awake. It had seen the cost of weakness and was prepared to pay the price for strength. By the end of the first year after the broadcast, Earth had changed completely. Nations no longer acted as separate entities. Scientists, soldiers, and citizens from every corner of the globe worked toward a single purpose. Secret networks thrived. Underground cities and hidden laboratories expanded. Innovations in technology and strategy advanced at unprecedented speeds. Humanity had learned from the Empire, adapted, and transformed. What had begun as grief and despair had evolved into unity, purpose, and readiness. The memory of the broadcast remained vivid in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. But it no longer brought only fear. It brought focus. Humanity was ready to rise from its ashes. The Empire had believed that 10 billion deaths would silence a species. Instead, it awakened one. And that awakening would not be quiet. The fires of loss had sparked a determination that would shape the future of. After months of preparation, Earth was no longer a planet of grief and fear. The world had transformed into a network of determination and silent determination. Governments, scientists, engineers, and ordinary citizens worked together with a single goal: to ensure humanity could survive and eventually fight back. The grief from the broadcast that had shown 10 billion lives destroyed had not disappeared, but it had been shaped into a driving force. Every human being who had survived felt a quiet responsibility, not just to themselves, but to those who were gone. Humanity could not afford to fail. The first step was technology. Engineers and scientists, many of whom had never imagined they would be working on such projects, began experimenting with alien technology recovered from distant colonies. Pieces of wreckage, energy readings, and data fragments became their guide. They were trying to understand the impossible: how the Empire's ships moved, how their weapons operated, and most importantly, how to counter them. Every experiment carried risks. Explosions were common. Systems failed, but progress, however small, was steady. With each breakthrough, humans gained knowledge that no one on Earth had dreamed possible. It wasn't just technology. It was strategy. Military commanders from every nation came together in underground command centers. Maps of the galaxy, previously just points of light, were now filled with targets, risks, and possibilities. The first task was not revenge, but understanding. How had the Empire planned the extermination? How could humans avoid the same mistakes? Simulations ran continuously, with teams working in shifts around the clock. Pilots, soldiers, and tacticians learned to anticipate attacks that were faster, more precise, and far more lethal than anything Earth had faced before. At the heart of all, this was a secret project, one that had existed in fragments for decades, but had never been fully realized. It was known as Project Extinct, a plan that had originally been intended for theoretical defense against extraterrestrial threats. The broadcast had changed everything. Now the project had a purpose. Not just survival, but preparation for a war that could decide the fate of humanity. Secret bases were established on remote islands, deep underground, and on space stations hidden in orbit. Each base became a hub of knowledge, training, and development. The creation of the fleet was humanity's most ambitious undertaking. Entire cities worked tirelessly to build ships that could survive in space, carry advanced weapons, and operate as part of a coordinated strike force. The ships themselves were remarkable, sleek, dark, and designed for both speed and stealth. They were equipped with shields that could absorb impacts unimaginable to humans a year earlier, and weapons that could penetrate even the Empire's strongest defenses. Pilots trained endlessly, learning how to maneuver in zero-gravity, engage enemy targets, and execute complex operations under extreme pressure. Even civilians contributed. Engineers, mathematicians, and programmers volunteered their skills, building systems to manage logistics, communication, and intelligence. Hospitals and medical teams prepared for the possibility of casualties. Families of soldiers contributed by keeping the home front secure and functional. Every human effort, no matter how small, was part of the larger mission. There was a sense of unity that had never existed before. Earth had become more than a planet. It was a single organism working toward survival and eventual victory. The fleet itself became a symbol of hope. Each ship represented not just technology, but the will of humanity to fight back. Names were not given to the ship's numbers, and designations were used instead, emphasizing the collective effort rather than individual glory. Pilots often spoke of their ships as partners, as extensions of themselves rather than machines. They trained together, lived together, and learned to anticipate each other's movements as if they were one entity. By the time the fleet was ready to leave the hidden shipyards, humans had learned more about strategy, technology, and survival than any other species in the galaxy. But preparation alone was not enough. Humans needed intelligence. Scouts were sent into space, some in secret missions to gather information from the Empire's outer territories. These missions were dangerous. Ships could vanish without a trace, and crews were often isolated for weeks at a time. Yet the information they returned with was invaluable. They mapped alien defenses, studied fleet movements, and discovered weaknesses in both ships and weapon systems. Every mission made humanity stronger, smarter, and more prepared. Meanwhile, psychological preparation became critical. Humans understood that a battle against the Empire would not just be physical, it would test courage, patience, and resilience. Soldiers were trained to face overwhelming odds without panic. Pilots were conditioned to make split-second decisions under extreme stress. Leaders practiced calm communication in situations where mistakes could mean destruction. Even civilians participated in simulations, learning how to adapt to emergencies, respond to threats, and support one another under pressure. Humanity's mental fortitude grew alongside its technology and strategy. As the years passed, the fleet grew. Each new ship was faster, stronger, and smarter than the last. Weapon systems evolved, drawing on alien technology, but enhanced by human ingenuity. Stealth systems allowed ships to remain undetected, even by the Empire's long-range sensors. Shields and armor could withstand blasts that would have destroyed ordinary vessels. And yet, despite all the technological progress, humans never forgot the lessons of the broadcast. 10 billion lives had been lost because humanity had been unprepared. That memory, seared into the collective consciousness, guided every decision, every design, and every training exercise. The fleet was not just a tool of war, it was a promise. A promise to the dead that humanity would survive. A promise to the living that no one would face extinction without a fight. Every human involved understood the weight of that promise. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a source of pride. Humanity had transformed its fear, grief, and anger into something productive, something powerful. For the first time in history, Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a force capable of challenging the galaxy itself. Training became relentless. Pilots ran simulations that tested their limits. Soldiers drilled in tactics that required precision and coordination, and engineers constantly upgraded systems to adapt to potential threats. Every team understood that mistakes could be fatal, but the risk was embraced. Humans had learned that survival required discipline, courage, and unwavering focus. The past had shown what happened when they were unprepared. Now they were preparing for a war unlike any other. Communication networks evolved as well. The fleet needed instant coordination across vast distances of space. Engineers developed systems that could transmit data faster than anything previously possible. Secure channels ensured that no enemy could intercept plans. Intelligence flowed seamlessly between ships, bases, and command centers on Earth. Every human involved, from commanders to maintenance crews, played a role in this intricate web of strategy and technology. As the fleet neared readiness, humans began to consider the psychological impact on the Empire. The broadcast that had shown 10 billion deaths was once a demonstration of fear. Now, the fleet's existence became a demonstration of human resilience, intelligence, and determination. If the Empire believed that humans could be defeated so easily once, it would soon learn that they had underestimated the species they tried to destroy. The balance of power, once heavily in favor of the aliens, was beginning to shift. Finally, after years of preparation, the fleet was ready. Ships gleamed in the hidden shipyards, ready to move beyond Earth's orbit and into the unknown. Crews stood at their stations, not with fear, but with determination. Engineers monitored systems, pilots reviewed strategies, and commanders coordinated every detail. Humanity had built not just a fleet, but a symbol of hope, unity, and strength. Every human involved knew that the coming missions would be dangerous. Many would not return. But they also knew that survival, for the species, demanded courage, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. The first orders were clear: reconnaissance, learning, and testing. The fleet would move into the galaxy with stealth, gathering information, and preparing for the day humanity would confront the Empire. It was not yet time for full-scale attack. Precision, patience, and intelligence would determine the outcome. Humans had learned from the mistakes of the past. Rushing into battle without preparation had led to catastrophe. Now they were ready to strike, but only when the moment was right. In the quiet moments before departure, humans reflected on the journey that had brought them here. They had turned grief into action, fear into preparation, and anger into determination. They had transformed the planet into a united force, a species ready to face the unimaginable. And while the scars of the broadcast would never fade, they served as a constant reminder of why humans fought, why they trained, and why they would never allow such destruction to happen again. The fleet left Earth in silence, a shadow moving into the stars. It carried not just weapons and technology, but the spirit of the species that refused to be erased. Humanity had learned its lesson the hard way, and it had emerged stronger, smarter, and more united than ever before. The stage was set. The first steps of Operation Alien Extinct had begun. Earth. The day humanity took its first step into the stars was unlike any other in history. Earth's skies were quiet, but beneath the calm surface, fleets of black-hulled ships moved in perfect coordination, leaving the atmosphere behind and entering the darkness of space. On the ground, millions watched from hidden observation points, satellites, and secure communication channels. For the first time since the broadcast that had destroyed 10 billion lives, hope and fear walked together. People knew the stakes. Humanity had survived once, but now it was moving beyond defense. This was the beginning of retaliation. Inside the fleet, every human felt the weight of what they carried. It was not just metal, fuel, or weapons. They carried the memory of every life lost. Engineers monitored the systems they had worked on for years, checking shields, propulsion, and weapons. Pilots prepared for maneuvers they had trained for countless times, simulations that could mean life or death in real space combat. Soldiers readied their weapons, medical teams prepped for casualties, and commanders coordinated movements with precision that would rival any alien strategy. Every action was measured, deliberate, and purposeful as the fleet left the solar system. The first sense of unity among humans in space became apparent. Communication lines were silent at first, as everyone focused on the enormity of the moment. Then, slowly, messages of encouragement flowed. Pilots coordinated with engineers, soldiers checked in with commanders, and families on Earth followed. Every transmission with anxious hearts. The reality of space travel, of moving toward a galaxy that had once shown humanity its weakness, settled on everyone like a heavy weight, but it was accompanied by determination. Humans were no longer passive. They were actors in their own story, ready to face what had once seemed impossible. The journey was long. Stars streaked past as humans moved toward the outer territories of the Empire. They encountered nothing at first. No alien fleets, no patrols, only the silent void. But even silence carried tension. Every human knew that the Empire was powerful, patient, and capable of striking without warning. Scanners and sensors worked constantly, mapping star systems, detecting anomalies, and recording any sign of alien activity. Pilots became experts at maneuvering in zero gravity. Engineers maintained the fleet under extreme conditions, and soldiers drilled for every possible contingency. Every day in the void was a test of endurance, skill, and focus. After weeks of travel, the first contact occurred. Alien scouts, much smaller than the main fleet but fast and deadly, approached the human vessels. For the first time, humans saw the Empire's technology up close. Ships shimmered with strange energy fields, moving faster than any human vessel could achieve. Their weapons glowed with intense power, capable of destroying entire ships in seconds. Many in the fleet held their breath as the first shots were fired not at humans, but as a warning. The Empire had noticed the fleet, and it was testing humanity's strength. The human response was precise. Pilots executed maneuvers they had practiced countless times, dodging energy blasts with skill that came from years of preparation. Engineers recalibrated shields on the fly, adapting to weapon frequencies that were previously unknown. Soldiers prepared for boarding actions, though the opportunity had not yet come. The first encounter lasted only minutes, but it was a victory. In itself, humanity had survived, not by chance, but by preparation, skill, and cooperation. This was the first proof that the species the Empire had tried to destroy could fight back in the days that followed. The fleet continued to advance, gathering intelligence, testing strategies, and learning from each encounter. Every skirmish, no matter how small, was a lesson. Pilots noted the speed and patterns of alien ships. Engineers discovered ways to counter energy shields. Soldiers observed alien tactics, analyzing weaknesses in formations and behavior. Humanity's intelligence and adaptability became its most powerful weapons. Each day brought progress, and every human involved felt a growing sense of confidence. They were no longer just survivors, they were warriors. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the broadcast of human movements was carefully controlled. People watched with bated breath as reports filtered in. Small skirmishes, evasive maneuvers, and successes against alien scouts. Families held on to every detail, proud and anxious. The sense of connection was profound. Every human on Earth felt, as if they were part of the fleet, that their hopes, Fears and prayers traveled with every ship. This shared consciousness strengthened humanity's resolve, making the mission more than a military campaign. It was the survival of an entire species in both spirit and action. Then came the first major engagement. A small alien outpost, previously unknown, was detected near a planet that had been a hub for the Empire's operations. The fleet approached silently, shields activated, weapons ready. Commanders coordinated every movement, ensuring that no ship would be exposed unnecessarily. The first shots fired were from reconnaissance drones, which moved faster than any human eye could follow, transmitting live data back to the fleet. For the first time, humans had a clear understanding of alien defenses, turrets, energy barriers, and automated fighters, all designed to overwhelm intruders. The battle began in earnest. Human ships moved in formations designed to exploit every weakness they had discovered. Pilots executed maneuvers that forced alien weapons to misfire. Energy shields absorbed devastating blows, while countermeasures disrupted alien targeting. Systems. Engineers monitored every system, recalibrating shields and propulsion in real time. Soldiers prepared to board any disabled alien ship. The engagement was fierce, fast, and unpredictable, but humanity held its ground. By the end of the encounter, the outpost was neutralized, and human losses were minimal. It was a monumental success, proof that years of preparation had not been in vain. The psychological impact of that first victory was enormous. For the first time, humans realized that the Empire was not invincible. Reports of the battle spread across the fleet, boosting morale and strengthening the sense of unity. Pilots, soldiers, engineers, and commanders felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every action now carried deeper meaning. Humanity was not only fighting for survival, it was showing the galaxy that it could rise from the ashes, that the species thought defeated could stand, fight, and prevail. The fleet continued to move forward, encountering new challenges every day. Some alien patrols tried ambushes, while others set traps in asteroid fields or near uninhabited moons. Every challenge was met with adaptability. Pilots learned to anticipate enemy movements. Engineers developed new countermeasures, and soldiers prepared for combat in environments ranging from zero gravity to the surface of hostile planets. Humanity's ability to learn quickly became one of its greatest strengths. As the fleet pressed deeper into the Empire's territory, the stakes grew higher. Alien forces were more numerous, stronger, and better coordinated. Entire sections of the fleet faced overwhelming odds, testing the limits of human skill and technology. Yet even in these moments, humans displayed resilience. They adapted their strategies, reinforced their defenses, and relied on one another in ways that no simulation could have prepared them for. Every victory, no matter how small, reinforced the belief that humanity could survive and ultimately win against the Empire. At the same time, humans discovered something unexpected. The Empire had weaknesses. Its bureaucracy was rigid, its strategies sometimes predictable, and its reliance on advanced technology made it vulnerable to disruption. By observing carefully and exploiting small gaps in tactics, humans began to gain advantages in engagements that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Intelligence, observation, and adaptability proved more valuable than raw power. The fleet moved with purpose, striking when and where it mattered most, minimizing risk while maximizing impact. The journey through the Empire's territory revealed more than military strategy, revealed the nature of humanity itself. Courage, ingenuity, and cooperation became visible not just in technical achievements, but in the small acts of bravery from individuals. Pilots risked everything to protect comrades. Engineers stayed at their posts under fire to keep systems running. Soldiers made decisions that saved lives even at great personal risk. Every human involved contributed to a collective effort that transcended fear and doubt. By the end of that first major campaign in alien space, the fleet had accomplished more than anyone could have imagined. A first alien outpost had been neutralized, reconnaissance missions had mapped key enemy positions, and humans had demonstrated the power of strategy, skill, and unity. Every crew member understood that this was only the beginning. The Empire had shown its strength, but humans had shown theirs too. A new chapter in the galaxy was opening, one written by the species that had survived annihilation and refused to remain powerless. And yet, humans did not celebrate. There was no victory parade, no triumphant speeches. Every success was tempered by the memory of the 10 billion lives lost, by the understanding that the Empire's response could be devastating if provoked carelessly. The fleet moved with caution, with precision, and with an unwavering sense of purpose. Each engagement reinforced a lesson learned long ago. Survival depended on intelligence, adaptability, and unity, and humans had all three in abundance. As the fleet continued its journey, the first victories had changed humanity. The fleet had survived alien patrols, neutralized outposts, and returned with invaluable intelligence. For the first time since the broadcast that had destroyed 10 billion lives, humans began to believe they could fight back and win. But now, the challenge was greater than ever. The Empire, once thought invincible, was starting to recognize that the species it had tried to destroy was no ordinary opponent. Humanity was no longer hiding. It was moving with precision, intelligence, and relentless determination. The war that followed was unlike anything humans had imagined. Entire star systems became battlegrounds. Alien fleets, much larger and more powerful than the first scouts, moved to confront the human threat. But by now, humans had learned from every encounter. They used stealth, strategy, and adaptability to their advantage. Each battle tested courage, skill, and unity. The fleet's pilots became experts in zero-gravity maneuvers. Engineers adapted weapons in real time, and soldiers coordinated strikes with unparalleled precision. Humanity had transformed into a species capable of fighting a war across the stars. The first major campaign was against a system that had been a key supply hub for the Empire. Intelligence from earlier missions had mapped every base, patrol route, and weapons station. Human commanders devised a plan that was bold and meticulous. Instead of rushing in with sheer force, they used diversionary tactics, splitting the enemy's attention and exploiting weaknesses in the alien defenses. Pilots flew in small squads, drawing fire away from the main fleet. Engineers remotely disabled energy shields. Soldiers were ready to board and neutralize critical points. Every move was calculated, and for the first time, humans saw how strategy could outweigh raw power. When the battle began, the scale was overwhelming. Alien cruisers, bristling with weapons, swarmed toward the human fleet. Energy blasts streaked across space, lighting up the darkness with deadly brilliance. Humans responded with calm precision. Pilots dodged, countered, and lured the enemy into traps. Shields held, and weapons found their marks. Engineers worked tirelessly, rerouting energy to maintain balance and strength. Soldiers executed coordinated boarding missions, neutralizing critical systems. The fleet moved like a single organism, every part working in harmony with the whole. The human victories did not come without sacrifice. Ships were lost, and brave individuals gave their lives to protect others. In every engagement, the memory of those lost during the Empire's initial broadcast fueled the determination of the survivors. They fought not just for themselves, but for the 10 billion who had died, for families ripped apart, and for the chance to ensure that no species would ever face such destruction again. Courage became the defining trait of humanity. Every human involved knew that the odds were overwhelming, but they also knew that unity and intelligence could turn the tide. As the campaign continued, humans discovered that the Empire's dominance was not as absolute as it had seemed. Alien strategies, once thought flawless, could be anticipated and countered. Fleets relied heavily on technology, and humans had learned to exploit its limitations. Pilots found patterns in enemy maneuvers. Engineers discovered ways to disrupt energy weapons. Soldiers identified weak points in defenses. Every encounter became a lesson, and every lesson strengthened humanity's confidence. The Empire had underestimated a species that could adapt, learn, and act with precision. Throughout these battles, human commanders made a critical decision: communication and transparency. The fleet maintained constant updates with Earth. Families followed missions closely, tracking progress, celebrating victories, and supporting one another. Even civilians on Earth felt part of the effort, contributing to intelligence, technology, and morale. This connection reinforced the human spirit. Unlike the Empire, which relied on fear and control, humanity relied on trust, collaboration, and shared purpose. Every citizen, pilot, engineer, and soldier understood that survival depended on everyone working together. As humans advanced deeper into the Empire's territory, they began to inspire fear. Systems that had once been confident in their dominance were now cautious. Alien forces that had ignored each other's warnings began to spread out, observing every movement with heightened vigilance. Humans, once considered weak and insignificant, had become a species to respect, even fear. And yet, humanity's purpose remained clear: survival, justice, and the protection of the innocent. There was no cruelty in their strategy, only precision, courage, and determination. The war was not only about combat, it was about breaking the Empire's sense of invincibility. Each successful mission sent a message across the galaxy. Humans had survived annihilation once, and they could do it again. Alien colonies that had been loyal to the Empire began to question their leaders. Small rebellions emerged, inspired by reports of human victories. Intelligence networks discovered that many alien factions were beginning to coordinate with humans, either secretly or openly. Humanity's influence spread not through fear, but through proof of resilience and capability. One of the most challenging aspects of the campaign was the psychological warfare. Humans had to remain calm under extreme stress, make split-second decisions, and act with precision despite overwhelming odds. Pilots flew missions that lasted days without sleep. Engineers maintained critical systems while under bombardment, and soldiers executed boarding operations in environments that defied every instinct. Yet, through all this, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. Fear existed, yes, but it was harnessed, transformed into focus, courage, and unity. The fleet's victories inspired innovations that further strengthened humanity's capabilities. New energy weapons were developed, combining human ingenuity with lessons learned from alien technology. Shields were upgraded to withstand previously deadly attacks. Pilots and soldiers developed coordinated tactics that allowed smaller forces to defeat much larger fleets. Engineers worked alongside tacticians to predict enemy movements, creating strategies that gave humans a significant edge. Every battle became a test, a learning opportunity, and a step toward eventual victory. As the war progressed, humans faced ethical decisions that tested their values. The Empire had committed atrocities on an unimaginable scale, and humans had the power to retaliate. But commanders insisted on maintaining discipline. Every action was measured to avoid unnecessary loss of life among civilians. Humans understood that the Empire's cruelty had not defined them. Every victory was tempered with restraint, ensuring that humanity would remain a species worth saving, not just powerful, but moral. By the time the fleet approached the Empire's core systems, the galaxy was changing. Alien citizens, once loyal to the Empire, began to doubt their leaders. Small systems defected or surrendered quietly. Intelligence from these systems provided humans with more information, allowing them to plan even larger operations. The war, once thought unwinnable, had become a campaign of hope, courage, and strategy. Humanity had not only survived, it was shaping the galaxy in ways that had once seemed impossible. Throughout the conflict, humans remembered why they fought. Every battle, every sacrifice, every strategic maneuver was a tribute to the 10 billion lives lost in the Empire's broadcast. The memory of that horror drove them forward, ensuring that their actions were guided by purpose, not just survival. Humanity had learned that power alone was not enough. Courage, intelligence, and unity were equally critical, and it was these qualities that allowed the fleet to challenge an empire that had once seemed invincible. The war was fierce and relentless, but humanity continued to advance. Pilots became legends for daring maneuvers. Engineers were celebrated for innovations that turned the tide of battle. Soldiers were honored for bravery in the most dangerous operations. Every individual played a critical role, and together, humans began to rewrite what it meant to be a species in the galaxy. They were no longer victims. They were survivors. Warriors and symbols of resilience dot in every victory. Humans gained more than territory. They gained confidence, intelligence, and momentum. The Empire, once supreme, began to falter under the unexpected skill, strategy, and determination of humanity. Fleets that had once been confident now moved cautiously. Bases that had been thought secure were neutralized. Communication lines, logistics, and strategies were intercepted and disrupted by humans who had mastered the art of adaptability. The balance of power was shifting, and the galaxy was taking notice that, by the end of this phase of the campaign, humanity had accomplished something extraordinary. Entire sectors once controlled by the Empire had been liberated. Alien forces had been weakened and demoralized. Intelligence networks were stronger than ever. And most importantly, humans had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that survival was only the beginning. They had learned to fight, to adapt, and to thrive in a war that had seemed impossible. The war was far from over, but humanity had changed the rules of engagement. The species that had once faced annihilation had become a force to be reckoned with. Each victory reinforced a simple truth. Humans were defined not by fear, weakness, or loss, but by resilience, courage, and determination. The fleet, the soldiers, the pilots, and the engineers had become the embodiment of a species that refused to be erased. And as they moved toward the Empire's heart, every who, the final phase of humanity's campaign against the Galactic Empire had begun. Years of preparation, training, and small victories had led to this moment. The fleet, once hidden in secret bases, now moved with purpose toward the heart of the Empire, the center of power that had orchestrated the annihilation of 10 billion humans. Every pilot, soldier, engineer, and commander knew the stakes. This was not just a battle. It was the culmination of every sacrifice, every innovation, and every act of courage since the broadcast that had changed the world. As the fleet approached the Empire's core systems, tension ran high. Sensors detected enormous alien fleets, guarding critical sectors, massive stations bristling with weapons, and patrols moving with precision and speed that challenged even the most experienced human pilots. Engineers worked around the clock to maintain shields, weapon systems, and propulsion. Soldiers drilled for boarding operations that could decide the outcome of entire battles. Pilots ran simulations in real time, preparing for every maneuver the Empire might attempt. Every human aboard knew that failure was not an option, yet fear was ever present. It was not panic, it was awareness, sharpened by years of experience, focus, and determination. The first engagements were brutal. Alien fleets moved quickly, attempting to overwhelm the humans with superior numbers and firepower. But humanity had learned to adapt. Pilots executed daring maneuvers, drawing enemy ships into traps while smaller, faster craft disabled weapon systems. Energy shields absorbed devastating attacks, while human weapons struck critical points with precision. Engineers recalibrated systems on the fly, ensuring that ships could continue fighting despite damage. Soldiers boarded disabled alien vessels, neutralizing defenses and gathering intelligence that would be used to plan the next strikes. Every battle was a test of skill, courage, and teamwork. The human fleet pushed forward relentlessly. For the first time, they encountered alien officers, commanders who had orchestrated attacks against humanity for years. These encounters were intense, requiring coordination, observation, and split-second decisions. Humans had grown stronger, faster, and more adaptive than the Empire expected. Each victory in these battles was not just a tactical success. It was a psychological blow to the alien forces, who had underestimated the resilience and intelligence of the species they had tried to exterminate. Communication became critical. Earth maintained secure lines with the fleet, and civilians on the planet followed every engagement with anxious hope. Families, friends, and citizens everywhere understood that they were part of this effort, even from afar. Every transmission, report, and signal from the fleet inspired courage and reinforced unity. Humanity was no longer just fighting in space. It was fighting together as one species, connected by determination, hope, and a shared sense of purpose. As the fleet moved closer to the Empire's capital systems, the scale of the challenge became clear. Massive fleets guarded orbital stations, superweapons bristled with energy, and defensive networks stretched across entire planets. Humans had prepared for this moment, but preparation alone could not guarantee success. Every move had to be precise, every tactic coordinated, and every crew member focused. Failure could mean not just defeat, but the end of the species they had fought so hard to protect. The first assault on the Empire's capital was a mixture of strategy, courage, and human ingenuity. Pilots led feints, drawing enemy fire away from critical targets. Engineers used the Empire's own energy systems against them, creating disruptions that allowed human ships to advance. Soldiers prepared for boarding operations on stations that had once seemed untouchable. Every human aboard the fleet played a role, knowing that their actions would directly affect the outcome of the battle and the future of humanity. The fighting was intense and unrelenting. Alien superweapons fired with incredible power, capable of leveling entire cities in seconds. Energy shields flickered under the strain, and the human fleet sustained losses. Yet for every ship destroyed, humans adapted, learning from the encounter and using it to improve the next assault. The combination of intelligence, strategy, and courage allowed them to survive and to strike back with precision. Each victory, however small, brought them closer to the Empire's heart and the ultimate goal, liberation and justice. After days of relentless fighting, humans launched a coordinated strike against the Empire's Central Command Station. This was the most dangerous mission of all. Pilots navigated through dense fire, evading superweapons and disabling defensive systems. Engineers provided real-time adjustments, maintaining shields and weapon output despite the onslaught. Soldiers prepared to board the station, knowing that success or failure would decide the outcome of the war. Every action was critical, and every human involved understood the risk. Courage, skill, and unity were the only tools they had against such overwhelming power. The boarding operation was executed with precision. Teams moved through corridors of the station, disabling energy systems and confronting alien forces. Every encounter tested their resolve, but years of preparation, training, and experience paid off. Humans moved efficiently, using their knowledge of alien technology and tactics to neutralize threats quickly. Engineers hacked into control systems, turning the station's own weapons against it. Soldiers cleared critical areas, securing pathways and ensuring that the command network was disrupted. Every step brought humanity closer to victory. Finally, the core of the Empire's command station was reached. Humans confronted the alien leaders who had orchestrated the destruction of 10 billion lives. These encounters were tense, requiring strategy, observation, and courage. Humans used intelligence and precision to neutralize the threat without unnecessary casualties. The station's control systems were disabled and energy grids shut down. The Empire's command network, which had seemed invincible, collapsed. Under the coordinated effort of the human fleet. With the command station neutralized, the Empire's forces began to falter. Alien fleets retreated, defensive systems shut down, and communication networks failed. Humanity's victories had not just destroyed physical targets, they had disrupted morale, command, and coordination across the Empire. Across the galaxy, those who had once feared the humans began to see them as a formidable force, a species that had survived annihilation and returned stronger, smarter, and united. The fleet continued to secure systems, liberating worlds that had once been under Empire control. Citizens on liberated planets greeted humans with hope and gratitude. Supplies, technology, and intelligence were shared, strengthening the alliance against the Empire. Humans had not only survived, they had changed the galaxy. They had transformed from victims into liberators, warriors, and symbols of resilience and courage. Every life lost, every sacrifice made, had contributed to this moment. The broadcast of humanity's final victory was carefully prepared. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed the culmination of years of struggle and resilience. Images of the fleet moving through the stars, of liberated planets, and of humans standing united, reached billions across distant systems. The message was clear. Humanity had survived, learned, and prevailed. 10 billion lives had been lost, but humanity had ensured that their deaths would not be in vain. The broadcast inspired hope, courage, and respect across the galaxy, demonstrating that no power, no matter how great, could extinguish a species determined to survive and protect its future. Back on Earth, celebrations were quiet but profound. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged victorious. Families reunited, communities healed, and the planet reflected on the sacrifices that had been made. Engineers, pilots, soldiers, and commanders received recognition not only for their bravery, but for their role in ensuring that humanity would survive. The lessons learned, the technology developed, and the courage displayed would guide future generations. Humans had learned the power of unity, intelligence, and determination, and these lessons would never be forgotten. The fleet returned to Earth slowly, moving with both caution and triumph. Pilots reflected on the journey, engineers celebrated their successes, and soldiers honored the memories of those lost. The galaxy had changed, and humanity had changed with it. What had begun as a species on the brink of extinction had become a symbol of resilience and hope. The Empire, once feared and thought unstoppable, had been brought to its knees. And humanity, through courage, intelligence, and unity, had ensured that it would never again be powerless. Even after the fighting ended, humanity remained vigilant. Lessons from the war were recorded, strategies documented, and technology preserved. Humans understood that survival required constant learning, preparation, and unity. Yet for the first time in history, the species could look back without fear, knowing that it had faced annihilation and emerged stronger. The memory of 10 billion lives lost would remain forever, a reminder of the stakes and a motivation for future generations to protect, preserve, and explore. In the quiet aftermath, humans realized something profound. Survival had never been enough. They had survived the Empire's attack, learned from it, and now had the power to shape the galaxy. The broadcast that had once shown humanity, its vulnerability now became a reminder of strength, courage, and determination. Every human involved, every citizen on Earth, and every Liberate